The notification came at the most ordinary moment, when I was pushing my fork against the remnants of roasted vegetables on my plate, absent-mindedly listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator. The house was too still, the kind of stillness that grows heavy when you've grown tired of excuses. My phone buzzed on the table beside me. At first, I thought it was him finally sending another, late night, don't wait up, text. But when I turned the screen toward me, my stomach dropped for a split second. It wasn't from him. The number was unfamiliar, but the image it carried was seared into my mind before I could even blink it away. My husband, half-dressed, lounging on a crisp white hotel bed. His shirt was unbuttoned halfway, revealing skin I knew too well. And beside him, draped across his chest like she owned him, was a woman whose face I recognized in fragments from whispers, suspicions, and the faint scent of foreign perfume on his collar. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking straight into the camera. Straight at me. Her lips brushed his cheek in a mockery of intimacy, and her painted nails curved possessively around his chest. Beneath the photo, a message, now you know. Walk away while you still can. I stared at the screen in silence, the clink of my fork echoing in my ears. My first instinct should have been to cry, to crumble into the betrayal now confirmed in full color. But no tears came. Instead, I felt the strange calm that comes when a storm finally breaks. For months I had felt it approaching, the late-night meetings, the cologne that wasn't his, the way he stopped looking me in the eye when he said he loved me. I had begged myself to believe his lies, hoping maybe I was the one imagining things. But now, the truth sat before me, bold and undeniable. And it hadn't destroyed me. It had freed me. I placed my phone down gently, the way someone might place a fragile glass ornament, and leaned back in my chair. I could almost hear her laughter, the mistress, as she pressed send. She probably thought I'd collapse, that I'd pack my bags or scream at him the moment he walked through the door. She thought she'd won, that she could drive me out with one carefully staged picture. How arrogant, how foolish. Instead of breaking, something inside me solidified. It was as though the shaky uncertainty I'd been living with had hardened into steel. Every time he had brushed me off, every whisper I had overheard, every night I'd lain awake wondering where he was, suddenly, it was all fuel. And it burned in a steady, controlled flame. I picked up my phone again, not to stare at the photo, but to read the message once more. Walk away while you still can. The audacity of it made me laugh out loud, the sound startling in the empty kitchen. Did she think I was some fragile porcelain doll? Did she think her little stunt was enough to chase me into the shadows, leaving her to bask in the spotlight? No, she had handed me exactly what I needed, proof. And proof was power. For a long moment, I considered my reply. I could lash out, send curses, let her know that she hadn't won. But I knew better. Anger was noise, and noise only gave away your position. I wanted silence. Silence was terrifying. Silence was a weapon. So I typed just one word, steady and deliberate, thank you. Then I set the phone down, pushed away my half-eaten dinner, and poured myself a glass of wine. The bitterness of it matched the bitterness that had lived inside me for too long. But as the minutes passed, something shifted. That bitterness transformed into clarity. Memories began unspooling in my mind, times I had ignored the signs, convincing myself it was paranoia. The sudden weekend, conferences. The way he had started showering as soon as he came home, as though washing something off him before I could notice. The distracted look in his eyes when I asked about his day. I had noticed them all, catalogued them silently, waiting. And now here it was. The confirmation, delivered not by him, but by the very woman who thought she could shatter me. I stood and walked slowly through the house, my heels clicking against the polished wooden floor. The walls seemed to whisper back memories of the life we had built here, photos from vacations, gifts exchanged on anniversaries, laughter that had once been genuine. But as I looked closer, those same walls reminded me of all the lies layered beneath the paint. The house felt less like a home and more like a stage. And I was no longer the naive wife waiting for her cue. By the time the clock struck 10, I knew what I had to do. I didn't rage. I didn't cry. Instead, I began gathering pieces, financial documents tucked into drawers, bank statements on my laptop, passwords I had memorized over the years. I moved like a woman on a mission, my body fueled by precision rather than panic. Every file, every detail was another step closer to liberation. When the garage door finally rumbled hours later, announcing his return, I had already hidden the evidence of my work. I returned to the kitchen, sipping calmly at my second glass of wine. He walked in, loosening his tie, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "Sorry, love, it was a long night at the office." The lie rolled so easily off his tongue it almost disgusted me. I smiled, kissed his cheek, and asked him if he wanted me to reheat his dinner. He didn't notice the way my eyes didn't soften, the way my hands didn't tremble. And as he sat down at the table, scrolling through his phone, I glanced at mine, still sitting silently on the counter. The message glowed faintly in the background, her smug little threat mocking me. But I felt no fear. Only resolve. She thought I would break. What she didn't realize was that she had just built me. The morning light spilled into the bedroom in soft streaks, but it did nothing to warm the chill that had taken root in me overnight. I rose earlier than usual, slipping out of bed while my husband still slept soundly beside me. His chest rose and fell with the steady rhythm of someone utterly unbothered, utterly unaware. If I stared too long, I might have remembered the man I once loved, but the photo on my phone from last night had burned that illusion away. I moved quietly, deliberately. The shower steamed around me as I stood under the water, letting it wash away not grief but hesitation. I wasn't the betrayed wife anymore. I was something sharper, someone with purpose. When I stepped out and faced my reflection, I saw it in my own eyes, calm, cold determination. By the time he finally stumbled into the kitchen, still rubbing sleep from his eyes, I was already dressed. Not in my usual casual clothes, but in a silk blouse tucked neatly into tailored trousers. My heels clicked against the tile as I placed a steaming cup of coffee on the counter. He glanced up at me with mild surprise. "Early meeting?" he asked, his tone casual, his eyes already flicking back to his phone. I kissed him lightly on the cheek, smiled, and said, something like that. The lie tasted sweeter than truth. He didn't notice. He never noticed anymore. And that was fine. The less he saw, the better. Once I was in the car, away from the house, I let the mask slip. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, but my mind was sharper than it had been in months. I drove not to the office, but to a sleek glass building downtown where my lawyer kept his practice. He was a man I'd only ever spoken to briefly, back when we'd drawn up our wills years ago, but he had the kind of reputation I needed now, quiet, precise, ruthless when necessary. When I walked into his office, he looked up, surprised to see me without my husband. His brow lifted at the expression on my face. "I need your help," I said simply. An hour later, I left his office with a folder tucked securely under my arm and the beginnings of a plan forming in my mind. The mistress's little photo stunt hadn't just given me pain, it had given me leverage. Proof. With that, doors opened. Lawyers listened. Strategies took shape. But I wasn't done. I needed more. That afternoon, while the city pulsed with its usual noise, I sat in a cafe with my laptop and dove into research. The mistress hadn't been careful. Her social media was littered with breadcrumbs, designer bags posed on hotel balconies, champagne glasses raised against skyline views, hashtags dripping with arrogance. She must have thought she was untouchable, that her secret was safe behind closed doors. But the more she flaunted, the more she revealed. One post showed a pair of diamond earrings I recognized instantly. I had seen the receipt tucked into my husband's jacket pocket weeks ago, written off as a gift for a client. Another post bragged about a weekend trip to Miami, with dates that aligned perfectly with one of his supposed business conferences. Each photo, each boast, became another piece of evidence for my growing case. By evening, I had compiled a meticulous folder, bank statements showing money bleeding from our accounts, screenshots of her social media posts, receipts that linked back to him. Every detail was like a thread, and I was weaving them into a noose. When I laid the folder out on the lawyer's desk the next day, he looked at me differently. Not as a victim, but as a strategist. "You've been preparing," he said, thumbing through the evidence. I shook my head. Not preparing. Waiting. And it was true. Deep down, I had known for months. I hadn't been ready then, but now. Now I had clarity. Meanwhile, at home, life continued as if nothing had changed. My husband carried on with his routines, leaving early, coming home late, spinning excuses with the smoothness of a man who believed his lies were impenetrable. I smiled at the right moments, kissed him goodnight, even asked about his day. He never suspected that while he whispered sweet nothings to her in some dim hotel room, I was quietly pulling threads from under him. I began shifting things quietly, too. Small but deliberate, transferring certain investments into my name. Closing one of our joint accounts under the guise of consolidating finances. Checking in with friends of his, cultivating conversations that would later matter. Every move was subtle, invisible to him, but each one chipped away at the empire he believed was unshakable. There were moments I almost faltered. Once, late at night, I heard his laugh drift from the other room while he spoke on the phone. It was a laugh I hadn't heard directed at me in years. For a moment, pain twisted inside me. This was the man I had once built a life with, the man I thought I knew. But then I remembered the photo, the smug eyes of the woman beside him, and my resolve hardened again. What struck me most was how little effort he put into hiding it anymore. He must have thought I was too naive, too trusting to ever look closer. Perhaps that was his greatest mistake. Underestimating me. 2 weeks passed like that. By day, I was the composed wife. By night, I was the architect of his undoing. My lawyer and I met regularly, refining the strategy, ensuring every detail was airtight. Divorce wasn't just an exit, it was leverage. With the evidence I had, I wouldn't just walk away. I would take everything he had tried to give to her. And all the while, she must have thought she had won. I imagined her laughing as she scrolled through my single-word reply, "Thank you." She probably thought it meant surrender. That I was grateful for her mercy. But in reality, I was grateful for something else. For her arrogance. For her recklessness. For handing me the ammunition I needed. I knew it was only a matter of time before the two of them decided to flaunt their affair in public. People like her, people who needed to prove they'd won, couldn't resist the spotlight. And when that moment came, I would be ready. So I waited, calm and patient, like a hunter in the dark. Every move I made was precise. Every smile I gave him was a disguise. Every late night he spent in her arms was another night I spent sharpening the blade he would never see coming. The night of the gala arrived like the final act of a play I had been rehearsing for weeks. The invitation had come through mutual acquaintances, the kind of high-profile charity event my husband thrived on, flashbulbs, champagne, and the illusion of status. It was the perfect stage. I had prepared for this night with a precision that bordered on obsession. The right dress, the right timing, the right people in the room. Every detail mattered. I slipped into a gown of deep emerald silk that clung to me like liquid light. My hair was styled sleek and simple, my makeup flawless but not ostentatious. I wanted to be impossible to ignore, but not desperate for attention. The kind of woman who turned heads without needing to. When I looked at myself in the mirror before leaving, I saw not the betrayed wife of weeks ago, but a woman in complete command of her fate. When I arrived at the hotel ballroom, the space was already buzzing with the hum of laughter, clinking glasses, and the constant pop of cameras. Chandeliers cast golden light over gowns and tuxedos, the air thick with the scent of money and ambition. My heels clicked across the marble floor as I entered, and heads turned, some with curiosity, others with the quiet acknowledgement of respect. I moved with a confidence that came not from hope but from certainty. And then I saw them. Across the room, my husband stood with his mistress draped on his arm. He wore the tailored black suit I had once picked out for him, though tonight it looked foreign, as though he belonged to someone else entirely. She, in a crimson dress that clung too tightly, wore the kind of smile meant to provoke. Her eyes flicked across the crowd until they found me. And when they did, her lips curved higher, triumphant, as if to say, "Here I am. Here we are. What will you do now?" I didn't flinch. Instead, I raised my glass of champagne toward her in the faintest of toasts and turned my attention elsewhere. That small gesture, the refusal to give her the reaction she wanted, made her grip on his arm tighten just slightly. Already, the cracks were beginning to show. The evening unfolded in a blur of speeches, handshakes, and polite laughter. My husband moved through the crowd as though nothing could touch him, as though he still owned the world. He had no idea what was coming. When he finally spotted me across the room, his smile faltered for a fraction of a second before he smoothed it over. He whispered something to her, and she laughed too loudly, a sound that grated like glass against stone. Then the moment came. The host, a man of influence and charisma, took the stage. He welcomed the crowd, thanked the guests, and spoke of the generosity that made events like this possible. And then his voice lifted with a flourish. Tonight, we are especially honored to announce our primary sponsor, whose vision and generosity have made this evening a reality. Please join me in thanking. My name. It echoed across the room like a bell toll. For a heartbeat, silence followed, as if the entire crowd needed a moment to process. Then applause erupted, thunderous and sustained. All eyes turned toward me. I rose from my table, every step deliberate as I crossed the floor to join the host on stage. Cameras flashed, catching the gleam of my dress, the poise of my walk, the calm pride on my face. I stood at the podium and spoke, my voice steady and warm, thanking the attendees, speaking of the foundation I had launched in my maiden name, a foundation dedicated to causes larger than myself. What I didn't say was that every dollar behind it had once been his.